Today, we're tackling something every single one of us has faced, that deeply frustrating reality of the stuck client. You know, the one where you just can't seem to make any headway. Well, we're going to look at how to completely transform our approach using trauma-informed motivational interviewing, or MI for short. If you've ever sat across from someone who feels totally walled off and you're just wondering, how on earth do I break through this? You are absolutely in the right place. We're going to unpack Dr. Denise Colson's insights to see exactly why those traditional approaches often fail trauma survivors, and how just a tiny shift in our perspective can literally change everything in the counseling room. Let's picture a scenario we all know a little too well. Your client sits down, they're giving you these flat, one-word answers, and you can practically feel their resistance. It's like a solid brick wall right in the middle of the room. You're trying your best to introduce the idea of going deeper, of really doing the work, and they are just completely stationary. For decades, the standard reaction in our field was to basically label this as the client's problem, right? We'd call them unmotivated or say they're in denial. But honestly, we have to ask ourselves, is that actually what's happening here? This brings us to a massive paradigm shift that we desperately need to make. Most of us, we were trained to see this behavior as pure obstruction. But the reality? It's actually just a nervous system doing its most vital, important job, which is protection. When we look at a trauma survivor, resistance is almost always a disguise. It's a person who has been deeply hurt before, and let's be real, often by the exact people who were supposed to help them. And they're just protecting themselves before they know if you are actually safe. If we treat their natural armor like it's a problem, we're really just confirming their worst suspicion, that they won't be seen or understood. I love this analogy. Think of this survival response as just the smoke rising from the fire underneath. So the question really isn't about how we force our way past the resistance. It's about how we safely navigate around it. Those intense survival tactics that literally kept your client alive, they don't just magically vanish the second they sit down in your counseling chair. The fire is the trauma. And all that smoke you're seeing, that's just their careful, protective behavior at work. And this is exactly where motivational interviewing steps in to gracefully disarm that wall. MI doesn't look at a client's resistance and decide to bring in a sledgehammer. Instead, it pauses, it gets genuinely curious, it operates on this really profound truth. Trauma survivors do not need to be immediately convinced to heal. They just need to feel safe enough to even entertain the possibility of healing in the first place. So how do we build that safety? Well, Dr. Colson highlights a really fantastic foundational toolkit for navigating these exact defenses, and it goes by the acronym OARS. OARS is absolutely the backbone of every trauma-sensitive conversation. We aren't jumping into complex psychoanalysis right out of the gate here. No, we're talking about mastering 4 deceptively simple but incredibly powerful communication techniques that basically whisper to a hypervigilant nervous system, hey, you're safe here. Let's break it down. The O stands for open-ended questions. Instead of totally boxing a client in by asking something like, did something happen recently? You ask, what brought you here today? See the difference? It signals that you aren't leading them into some kind of trap. You are safely following their pace. It essentially hands the steering wheel right back to the client, which, as you know, is incredibly empowering for someone whose power was historically taken away from them. Next up, we have affirmations. That's the A. Now, to be clear, these are not those empty cheerleading phrases like, wow, good job, which can honestly just ring so hollow. We're talking about genuine, highly specific observations that speak directly to the survivor's core wound, that deeply held belief that they aren't worth seeing. When you say something like, it took real courage to come back today after how difficult last week was, you're validating their struggle and shining a light on their inherent strength. Then we hit the R, reflections. Mirroring a client's words back to them does something amazing. It tells their cautious, nervous system, I am paying attention and you are not invisible. Whether it's just a simple repetition of the exact words they used, or maybe a slightly more complex reflection where you name the underlying feeling, you are proving in real time that you can track their experience. You're proving that what they say matters. Finally, we have the S, which stands for summaries. As we all know, trauma can leave memories and feelings feeling totally chaotic and disjointed. But when you can truly listen, organize all those fragmented pieces they've shared, and gracefully hand it back to them as one coherent summary, you do something profound. You make their story feel real, and you prove that their reality is absolutely not too overwhelming for you to handle. Now, it's absolutely crucial we understand how trauma can distort normal behavioral milestones. If we're only looking through a traditional lens, like the standard stages of change, we are going to get tripped up, for sure.
Think about it. What looks like a total lack of contemplation to us might actually be a textbook freeze response. Or what looks like active, enthusiastic participation. That might just be people-pleasing compliance because they're trying to manage your expectations and avoid conflict to stay safe. Without that trauma-informed lens, we can easily mistake safety-seeking behaviors for actual progress.
Within Dr. Colson's broader framework, which is known as the 12 STR, or Strategic Trauma and Abuse Recovery System, MI essentially acts as the critical bridge for Phase 1. This model recognizes a hard truth. You absolutely cannot take someone into deep trauma processing if they do not trust you first. Full stop. MI is exactly how we help a client comfortably and safely arrive at that breakthrough moment where they can generate their own insight and finally say, oh, I think what's happening with me now actually connects to what happened back then. I want to pivot for just a second and speak directly to any survivors who might be engaging with this explainer. This whole concept is anchored in a really beautiful truth. The right kind of presence does exist, and true healing is not going to break you further. There's this imagery from the book of Isaiah about not breaking a bruised reed or snuffing out a smoldering wick. It just perfectly captures the gentle, non-destructive approach that trauma recovery truly requires. If you've been in and out of therapy for years, wondering why you keep shutting down, I really want you to hear this next part. Please know that you are not broken, and you are not too resistant. Your nervous system is simply being incredibly wise and careful based on exactly what you've had to survive. You've learned through hard, lived experience that opening up in the wrong room can cost you dearly. Protecting yourself isn't some kind of dysfunction. It is literal wisdom written right into your body to keep you safe. And you know what? You don't have to be entirely ready to dive into the deep work right away. You just have to be willing to be heard, and honestly, that is enough to begin. When you find a practitioner who uses MI, someone who actually listens instead of just throwing advice at you, who is genuinely curious rather than pushing their own agenda, let yourself use that space. The right room does exist, and you are 100% allowed to just dip your toes in and test the waters first. All right, speaking back to those of us in the practitioner's seat now, the real challenge is actually maintaining that safe space, isn't it? MI is deceptively simple to describe on paper, but genuinely difficult to execute well consistently. When a session starts to feel kind of off, we really have to pause and ask ourselves, am I doing this right? Am I suddenly doing way more talking than listening? This isn't about giving ourselves a bad grade. It's just a quick self-check to catch ourselves when we inevitably slip back into pushing rather than staying curious. By leaning into the tools detailed in resources like Dr. Colson's 12 STR manual, we can really start to unlearn those outdated, unhelpful views we had on resistance. The manual gives us a great structure, but at the end of the day, it's the posture of motivational interviewing, those open questions, the genuine affirmations, the thoughtful reflections that actually unlocks the door. Because a single moment of self-generated insight from a client, that is worth 100 brilliant textbook explanations from us. So, I'm going to leave you with one final thought to reflect on for your own practice. Are you ready to stop pushing through the wall and start creating a safer room? Remember, trauma survivors don't need to be convinced to heal. They just need to feel safe enough to consider it. Every single time we choose curiosity over our own frustration, we're adding another solid brick to the foundation of that safety. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this transforms how you view the beautifully protective nervous systems of the people you serve.